It seems like we can't have nice things in Canada. Well, not discount airlines anyway. Hi, I'm Brian Lilley, political columnist for the Toronto Sun, and you may have heard recently that Lynx Air went under. It joins a long list of airlines that have tried and failed to bring discount travel to this country. Some people say, well, we can't have discount travel. We're too big, not enough people. Some others say it's the airline's fault. But there are real government issues at play here as to why we don't get discount airline fares in this country. The kind of great fares that we always hear about in the United States or in Europe or South America, they exist everywhere else, but they don't exist here. To try and get to the bottom of this, I wanted to speak to someone who would know. Duncan D is a former chief operating officer at Air Canada. He's also active on social media commenting on politics, and I reached out to him to get to the bottom of this. Thanks for the time, Duncan.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
Let's start with why Lynx Air failed. This was an outfit with a tremendous amount of experience behind it, some good money, some solid investors, Mitch Garber, Stephen Bronfman, and one of the big low-cost carrier investors from around the world in it. But it still couldn't make it in this country. And that's a real problem because we've just got a long list, a giant graveyard of attempts at bringing the kind of discount air travel that we have in the rest of the world to this country. And I don't see it getting any better.
Brian, you're exactly right. And I think that if you take a look at the pedigree of the folks behind Lynx, from an airline industry perspective, the fact that they could not make it work in Canada comes as a real shock. You've got, as you mentioned, one of the, granddaddies of ultra low cost carrier investors on the planet backing Lynx. This guy has experience investing in and running airlines in 4 different countries. In
You're talking
Chile,
Bill Franke of Indigo Partners, right?
exactly. Bill Franke of Indigo Partners. These guys own airlines in 4 countries on 3 continents. They have Wizz Air, for example, which is one of their platforms, their airlines in Europe, based in Hungary, but active throughout the European Union. That airline is celebrating 20 years of service this May. Okay. So, these are not flash in the pan, in and out investors. They have been around for a long time. And the fact that they couldn't make it work in Canada says more about Canada than it says about them or Lynx Air. And I think that Canadians should really pay attention.
I know that the head of the Canadian Airports Council wrote a piece in the Globe and Mail that you disagreed with. She was making the argument you can't have $39 or $39 fares, I think was her argument. And you showcased that yeah, you can in other parts of the world. And I remember calling an aunt in Glasgow several years ago, and she answered. I said, "Well, what are you doing?" She said, "I'm in Krakow." I said, "Why?" Because I got a cheap flight, so I came for the weekend. It was like
Right,
a bus fare flight.
right. Look, it's one of these things that has escaped Canada and has now continued to escape Canada. How many Canadians travel to Europe are sitting in a cafe in Paris or a pub in London, pull out their phone and there's an ad for in my case, it was a £2 fare from London to Edinburgh that I couldn't pass up. It was a £2 fare, £2 one way. We ended up paying £24 for the return for a total of £26. And my buddy and I said, look, let's just go to Edinburgh for the weekend for the kicks. So we
Yeah.
left, we left on a Thursday, came back on a Tuesday, and it was so much more fun because it really only cost us, I don't know, less than $45 Canadian to do it. And frankly, the entire aircraft was filled with people just like us. Like the seatmate I had across from me on the aisle was actually, as your aunt mentioned, was actually from Poland and had connected through Luton Airport in London to go up to Edinburgh because they had this incredible fare. For him, it was 17 euros to get from wherever he started in Poland through London to Edinburgh. And so this is something that Canadians who go overseas experience all the time, but it's something that is impossible in Canada. And I think the Canadian Airports Council gave a perfect argument as to why this is impossible in Canada.
I know some of this is structural in how we fund and set up our airports. And I want to get to that in a minute, but let me point out a few things that you know, but for the audience, and I'll get your take on it. Our airports are supposed to be not for profit, but they're a profit center for the federal government. $419 million in rent from the 26 biggest airports, most of that from Pearson and Trudeau in Montreal. 419 million, and that was for 2022-23. It's going to be more this year because they keep putting it up every year. 30% increase since Trudeau came to office, 45% increase over the last decade and a bit. That's staggering. Our jet fuel excise tax is not only higher, but we charge the carbon tax and the GST on top
On
of the
top of that, yeah.
excise tax. And then the security charges compared to the Americans are outrageous, and they're about to go up by a third. So I know there's a structural element in terms of how we assign airports, but isn't the federal government also just using this as cash cow? Because if you raise taxes generally across the board, everyone will notice. But if you just stick it to air travelers, well, then they're going to blame Air Canada. They're going to blame WestJet. They're not going to say, oh, the government's sticking it to me.
Look, Brian, I think that's exactly it. And so you've got the federal government. Actually, it was the Chrétien government that conceived of this entire system. Doug Young, who was the Minister of Transport at the time, he's a former MP from New Brunswick, he wanted to pursue this so-called user pay model. And so what the federal government did at the time, Chrétien was facing significant deficits. He wanted to offload services to other levels of government, but also offload it to what are now these so-called not-for-profit entities and the airport authorities. And as well, he commercialized air navigation. And so we now have this Nav Canada, which is, you know, one of the only private sector, apparently private sector, but it's wholly owned by government um, air navigation service providers on the planet. So what happens is at every step along the way, um, of an air traveler's experience, somebody's got their hand in their pockets. So, you know, you go into the airport and you're paying an airport fee. You step on the aircraft, you've got an air navigation fee. You go through security, you've got an air security fee, and the list goes on and on. And everybody has their cut as part of this entire swindle, really, that
Mhm.
Canadian air travelers are a part of. But, you know, the rationale for this, as you mentioned, was user pay. You know, it's a very noble, and I think you wrote about this as well, how it's a very noble principle that the folks that actually fly pay the freight of the cost of that flight. But
Yeah.
no other country on the planet uh, looks at this and says that the economy as a whole does not benefit from a dynamic aviation sector. So the basic infrastructure in most parts of the world, whether it's runways, airports, air navigation, has some degree of government involvement. They know that if they don't have these facilities, then you know that their country is worse off for it. But in Canada, we basically said no. This is something that only the air traveler is responsible for paying for. But if they were only responsible for paying for the cost of that infrastructure, it would be okay. But as you pointed out, Brian, the federal government takes almost half a billion dollars a year out of the system and puts it into general revenues. So, you know, they're not just asking air travelers to pay for the cost of the flight and the infrastructure to support that flight. They want the air traveler to pay the cost of hospitals or something else beyond just the cost of their
Well,
trip. And so you've got this crazy situation in Canada where travelers are just being nickel and dime everywhere.
so that 33% increase in the CATSA security charge, where they're going to increase our fee to have someone yell at us to take our laptops out of our bag, that goes up by a third. Service won't go up by a third. They won't be 33% nicer.
No.
It won't be 33% faster, but you know what it will do, Duncan, is the government estimates that they will get an additional 1.2 billion over 4 years as a result of this increase. So that's more than 250 million a year just from the extra security charge. Plus, you've got the airport rents, which will be over 500 million soon. This is basically squeezing us. Now, I'm not going to sit here and argue that the federal government should pay for everything so that I can have a cheap vacation, but they seem to be squeezing us, rather than if they eliminated these rents and different fees that aren't necessarily needed, would that have an impact? I mean, as former CEO of Air Canada, I'm betting you oversaw an awful lot of payments going to the government. Would Air Canada, would Lynx, would Flair, would WestJet be able to lower the fees that they charge travelers if they weren't being squeezed at every turn as well?
Well, look, Brian, at Air Canada, when I was there, our former CEO, Robert Milton, actually wanted to undertake an experiment. So when he had Air Canada launch Tango, which is no longer around, but Tango was the first low fare brand that Air Canada launched. He launched it with a $1 base fare to see how consumers would behave after the fact. That $1 base fare, so no different than the £2 fare I paid between London and Edinburgh. In Canada, that $1 fare ended up being $73 after all of the taxes, fees, and charges were added on by every one of these entities that takes a little bit here and there along the way. And so when you've got a $1 fare that ends up being $73, you can just imagine what a real fare looks like. And what airlines have been arguing in this country for the longest time is if you want to take that much out of the air transportation system in terms of fees, taxes, charges, and surcharges, then plow that money back into the infrastructure. One thing that travelers will notice when they travel in Canada versus, say, the United States or Europe, you can now actually keep your liquids and gels in your uh, carry-on baggage without having to take it out or without having to do anything with it, because in these other jurisdictions, those security agencies have invested in the latest technology to allow them to do 3D imaging, to do liquid explosive sniffing, to allow for travel to proceed much quicker and much more comfortably and conveniently. In Canada, our technology is still basically from the post 9/11 era. So everybody still has to take out their liquids and gels, take out their electronics, and have them swabbed manually by a CATSA agent at the security checkpoint. So they're not just taking money out of the system, they're also failing to invest in the system. People wonder why things like de-icing is so rotten at many airports in the country. Well, they just haven't been updated. We're using the same technology and the same principles and processes that we've always been using. And can you imagine another country that should be experts at de-icing?
That would
Uh,
be us.
that should be us. But Seattle, Washington, just south of Vancouver, does a better job of de-icing aircraft in the winter than Vancouver does. So, we've
Unreal.
gotten to a point where we've not just taken so much money out, we're also failing to invest in the very basic infrastructure that we need to keep
Uh,
people flying.
on that note of taking liquids through, uh, when I recently returned from Israel, we'd been traveling around Jerusalem for the day and went straight to the airport. I had a big bottle
Mm,
of sparkling water in my carry-on bag. Completely forgot about it. I'm going through LL security, the most
yeah.
extensive in the world. And I was, oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot this. They said, no, you can keep it. I was shocked.
Yep. I had the exact same experience. And we talk about countries like Israel, which are well renowned for their security and their technology and their know-how. I was in Southeast Asia 2 weeks ago, and I was traveling through Bangkok airport, and I had, just like you, forgotten a bottle of, it was actually soda in my carry-on. And when I was going through, the officer looked at it and said, "Is that soda?" And I said, "Yes, I'm so sorry." He goes, "No, no, that's fine." He pulled it out of my bag and he put it into this detector. And he goes, "It'll just take about 2 seconds." He put it into the detector and the detector flashed green. And he goes, "Yep, you can take it." And so it wasn't one of these painful lectures that you get from a CATSA agent telling you that you're such a bad person. Or, let's not forget Omar Al Gabra blaming travelers for being out of practice after the pandemic because they're failing to take out all their liquids and gels. So, I mean, this is something which other countries have come to terms with. They've used technology to get to where we are today. And Canada is just slowly falling behind every year because we're failing to invest.
Duncan, I want to ask you a couple of quick points on whether we could ever support, if we change some things, could we ever support discount airlines and the majors? As I always say, when somebody tells me that they hate Air Canada or they hate WestJet because the service is awful, I say, so you haven't flown in 20 years. We have very good airlines in this country. I think we need more competition. And as you would know, these discount carriers, they don't take away the business travel that's going to go on WestJet or Air Canada. They entice people that aren't flying now to go in. But when I talk about the failure of discount airlines in this country, what I'm always told is, well, it's because we're too big. Do you buy that answer that we are too big of a country, not enough people?
Not for 1 second. We're not just a big country. First of all, we're not as big as we think we are because the population is actually very well concentrated, in a sliver of that huge geography, along the U.S. border and a couple of large cities further north, like Edmonton and cities like that. But other than that, we really hug the Canada-US border in terms of our population. So we're not talking about people wanting to establish low-cost carriers so they can serve Iqaluit or the far north. You're talking about carriers that would really be no different than a Frontier Airlines or a Spirit Airlines in terms of the length of the flights that they would operate. You're talking about the Vancouver to Toronto's, the Calgary to Toronto's, the Toronto's to Halifax, the Montreal to Quebec City. I mean, those are the types of flights that you're talking about. You're not talking about these remote communities that can only support turboprops. So that argument, I think, is just one of these red herrings that is used to justify mediocrity. Number one, and number two, I mean, I also think that Canada, if you take a look at us on the global stage, we're also a very rich country. We're a country of flyers. We're a country where it shouldn't take a lot to convince somebody to spend the weekend in, Calgary because the fare is $17 or $27 as opposed to, $700 or $800. Just like your aunt was, never thinking of spending the weekend in Krakow. The fact that there was that attractive fare meant that she was going to do it. And so that's something that every other major industrialized country seems to be able to do except us.
Well, hopefully we smarten up. I'm not sure that we'll get there, but um, um, we can always hope. Thanks so much, Duncan.
Thanks, Brian.
Let us know what you think. Drop a comment down below, share this on social media, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.